Hi, everybody. Welcome. I'm Jess Holgrave. I'm the Chief of Staff at checkout.com. We're a global payments business headquartered in London, but we've got 19 offices around the world. We are technologists at heart. And so naturally, we could not ignore crypto. And it's been a really important topic for us for the last several years. We have the privilege to work with many, many amazing businesses around the world, including a lot in the crypto space. And today we've brought together a panel of real industry experts to discuss how blockchain is changing sports fan culture. Really excited to welcome you all here. Maybe let's start off with some introductions. Firstly, if I may go to Alex Dreyfus, who's the CEO of socios.com. Alex, give us a couple of minutes on who you are and what you do.
So I'm Alex Dreyfus. I run a company called socios.com. We are a company that is tokenizing sports team and try to engage and monetize fan base all over the world. The idea is simple. 99% of sports fans are not in the stadium, neither in the city, neither even in the country of the team they are supporting. And the question is, what can you do and what can you scale in order to engage and monetize that? And we created that 4 years ago. We work with AC Milan just here and just here in the camera, and we've been very, very lucky, and it works very well for the last 4 years.
Awesome. Thank you for joining us. Casper Stilsvig, who's the CRO at AC Milan.
Yeah, good afternoon. Casper Stilsvig, Chief Revenue Officer with AC Milan. I've been with the club now for 3 years, but been working in the world of sport for the last 15, 16 years, always in football. So a pleasure being here this afternoon.
And last but by no means least, Niraj Shah, who's the co-founder of DSO.
Thanks, Jess. I'll start with it's such a pleasure to be here with Alex, who's been a trailblazer in this industry, and Casper represents such an iconic brand that I grew up with in the 80s, those great teams. So I'm Niraj, co-founder of DSO.co, which stands for Digital Seat Ownership. And we're a team of sports people and technology enthusiasts who are really just getting started helping sports teams to create new revenue opportunities and new fan engagement opportunities linked to the seats in their stadium. So we can talk about more about that as we go.
Awesome. Thank you all so much. We've been involved, sort of watching fandom evolve in the digital age since the internet took off. The way that we watch sport, the way that we engage with those teams has changed. With social media and now things like the metaverse, it feels like the internet's really entrenched with how teams and how fans engage with one another. Alex, maybe if I can start with you. What are you seeing some of these real latest developments in the digital asset space, and like how are you seeing that changing fan culture?
So I'm old enough actually to remember 1999 and even a little bit before and after, meaning that I feel as an entrepreneur that we are living more or less the same cycle in terms of innovation, hype, but also creating utility eventually. I do believe that the technology, blockchain, crypto, metaverse, NFT, whatever we want to call it, but all this innovation that is supported and promoted right now is going to bring value for both teams and fans because it has to work for both ways. I have a love-hate relationship, for example, with NFTs. I love the technology. I hate the hype because it helped us a lot. So it's very selfish to say that, or rather ironic. But yet, we all have to be careful to build sustainable businesses, sustainable features. And sometimes, like in any gold rush, the people who make money are the guy who sell the shovel, I think it's called, and not necessarily the people who are actually finding the gold. And we are exactly in that phase. We are back in 2000, just 22 years later, with a different cycle, with a different tech, but yet the same patterns. And that's exciting because if you're lucky enough to be part of it, if you're lucky enough to bring value at the end for the users, which are the fans, then you can have a lot of fun.
I think you're right. A lot is the same, but things are changing as well. Niraj, maybe I can come to you. What do you think is different about this? Like, what fundamentally is blockchain enabling that we weren't seeing back in 2000?
So there's, building on what Alex just said, there's a real fundamental shift happening now, that the last one of these happened in the late 90s, early 2000s. So if we dial it back slightly and look at the history of sports, it used to be local. You had to go to the stadium and you might read about it in the paper, and that's about it. And then broadcast came and changed everything, and cable television and satellite television changed everything. Now we can watch. It's a one-way relationship. We can watch everywhere, but that's it. And then the internet came and changed everything again, and broadcast went to internet, and Web 1 was all about, now I can read instantly, and there's fan sites and all of those kind of things. And then with Web 2, when we went social and mobile, now we can interact with each other, and Fantasy League takes on a whole new meaning, and all of these kind of things. And I think that the difference with this phase now, so this I see as the fourth evolution of sports. The Web 3 is all about participation and ownership, feeling much more like you're part of it. So the kind of stuff that Alex is doing, the kind of stuff that we're working on, it's about how could you have a relationship with that sports organization or club that you've been a fan your whole life, that isn't just, I'm going to consume what you put out and I'm going to be a fan, but how can I now feel like I'm part of it? And I think the places this is going to go, when you look at that across all these different industries outside of sports, it's going to touch everything and revolutionize a lot of things.
Casper, you obviously sit in a slightly different situation. You're not building this technology, actually like living and breathing it as a sports team. How are you seeing tokens and other things change the way that sports fans are engaging with it? And maybe the metaverse, which is one of my current favorite dinner topics, you could touch on your thoughts on that as well.
No, absolutely. I think what has been a challenge for the sports teams, not only in the world of football over the last many years, is that you have a worldwide, for the sake of AC Milan, fan base, but how do you engage this fan base? For us, only not even 5% of our global fans are actually living in Italy. So we have 95% living outside Italy. And how do we reach these? There's been historically a lot of focus on the season ticket holders, because in the old days, we know how football clubs were developed, and they were supported by the local season ticket holders who got the action week in, week out. But for us, we need to be a part of the new offering as a fan engagement. And we think that especially the tokens are a new way of engaging fans on a global scale. People who unfortunately not able to attend games. We have the biggest stadium in Italy, but we can only have 80,000 at every game. But when we claim to have more than 500 million fans globally, there's another way we need to support these fans, and these fans need to be engaged with the club. And this as a new way of seeing it. And obviously, with the world becoming digital, we need to be a part of this. Most people in the Western world, they have a mobile device, a smartphone, and can access this very quickly. We're talking about 2 screens, we're talking about 3 screens now, we're talking about another way of consumption of it. And engagement, I can see it for my children, they can't watch 90 minutes of football unless they're in the stadium. It's impossible. But as soon as something else going on, that's where they want to engage. So when we grew up, I'm from Denmark originally, I had to cope with kick and rush from the English first division. Tells a little bit how old I am, but that was pretty painful. Saturday afternoon, couldn't even change the channel, but I stuck with it. But this is a new way of looking at it. And I think we need to talk about also attention span and sort of share of attention. And I think token is another way to engage with the fans.
You touched a little bit there on like the new generation and the way that they are engaging with this. Maybe Alex and Neeraj, I can also get your take on like, who are the fans that are really adopting this first? Because we know that user experience, all of that stuff is still can be a challenge in the Web3 space. So maybe Neeraj, I can come to you first. Like, who are you seeing start to pick this up?
The younger fans, because they're faster to adopt new technologies. They're a little bit more crypto savvy. I mean, a lot of what we're doing is we're working on that UX so that the crypto side of, the blockchain side of this doesn't even really matter. But even so, it's the younger fans, and we're seeing a lot of non-local fans. So touching on something Casper was saying, it's it's all these fans who are from these far-flung places where the English Premier League might happen in England, but they might be in the US, Asia, whatever. So I think that the globalization of this is interesting, but a demographic that wants to adopt this is definitely younger. But the partner at my accountancy firm, he knows what we're doing, and he's a season ticket holder at a club here in London, and he keeps telling me, I know this is the future, but I just want a physical season ticket book, like the old raffle book it used to be, and I want it to be that way. So I think one of the really important things that all of us here are thinking about and doing is, how does a club navigate that shift from older fan to younger fan and local fan to non-local fan in a way that respects all the people who've identities around the club and have put all their have put their time and attention on this club for maybe decades?
Yeah, it's actually the big challenge is, how do you balance this more casual fans with the more hardcore fans and the community fans, the people who live next to the stadium, who have a tattoo, who have an history and a legacy, and the more Instagram fans-ish, people who will go from one club to another because it's Zlatan or it's Messi or etc. So that's where it's interesting. In our case, because we've been live for 2 years and a half, we have more or less 1.5 million users. We've learned, and it's interesting, we have two kind of audiences today. We have the crypto native, the people who understand what we do because they don't need education. There are 200 million people in the world right now who have an education of what is blockchain-ish, what is a little bit crypto, that are at least curious towards that and not scared. And they will understand more what we do because it's common sense for them. And then you have the more casual and users that are still geeky, a bit tech savvy, that's going to have a leap of faith and engage with the product. And this is the two audiences. One is bigger than the other right now because, like in any cycle of innovation, you have the early adopters. And the early adopters are the ones you don't have to educate. They're the ones who come organically. And that's the first wave of users we got. Now in 2022, in our case, we're going to spend more or less 50 million euro in TV advertisements and with some celebrities, etc. at some point later in the year, because now our job is to try to get and to go after the more casual fans, the more casual users. The reality is, in our case, we have 130 teams in the world we're working with. And that was the job we spent the last 2 years. But now in 2022, it's not anymore about onboarding teams. It's about making it work and scaling user acquisition and generating engagement and revenue with all of these teams. And for that, we need to invest. We need to promote, we need to have a better product, we need to do all of these things. But once you get there, then you're going to start to capture the more traditional users, the more traditional fans, that's going to start to get to know us, because still now they don't know what our product. Of course, we are a partner of AC Milan and few other teams, but it doesn't mean that suddenly 300 million people are craving to go to our product, and that's fine. That's where we need now to grow and to go after that. And that's the beauty of being a B2C businesses like us, and why we need checkout.com, by the way, small advertisement. But it's how we go after these users and onboard them on a platform where there is a massive network effect between all of the teams that we are working with.
Casper, we just talked about AC Milan being a partner with Socios. How are your fans responding to this? Are they excited about it? Obviously, there's a bit of a spectrum, but what's some of the feedback that you've maybe heard?
No, I think generally they're excited about it. We pride ourselves, especially with the new ownership, to be an innovative club. So I think we need to be on riding this wave. Absolutely, we need to be a part of it. It might not be all fans, but that goes the same with all the other things we're offering in our merchandise. Not everyone likes it, but there will be taker for it. But I think it's a matter of showing intent and showing that we are trying to create something for the fans, because we have a big fan base. We cannot just put everyone in one bucket. So we need to think about the young audience, which are into gaming, into tokenization, and so forth. And we need to also respect the older generation who has been coming for generations to the stadium and season ticket holder, third, fourth generation. So this is just an offering which is very important to be a part of, and this is the reason we are offering this to our fans. We're not forcing anyone to be a part of this. It's an offering like anything else.
And if I may, what's interesting with every clubs is what we do, and us, but it's true for everybody else, is it doesn't compete, it complete. What does it mean? It means that every club has their own digital strategy. Every club has their own membership program. It doesn't matter if what they do and what we do have sometimes some common experiences and some common, let's say, goal. We do target different audiences. We do believe that a club will always be mainly focused and will always be successful in capturing their more traditional fans in that way, while startups like ours will be more aggressive and more flexible and more creative to capture this more younger fan and more tech savvy. And that's where it completes an offer. Actually, the first question usually I ask, or I say when people ask us about us is, in 2022, what is a fan? That's the first question. There is no such a definition of what is a fan. Fans today are multiple, it's a range of multiple tribes that consume sports differently, depends where they are, depends on which brands, etc. And so you do need to have different products for all of these tribes. And sometimes you will see a crossover in terms of product, but it doesn't matter because they are targeting different audiences. And that's where it's interesting, is we are creating incremental revenue and value for these clubs or sport property in general.
Alex, you touched earlier on the fans with the tattoos who are local. We also, Casper, you talked about some of the kind of the merchandise. You know, traditionally that has been collectible cards and bumper stickers and shirts and things. How are fans representing their affiliations in an online world? Because that's something really important. We see that, you know, the skins that people use in video games. Like, how is traditional sports memorabilia and merchandise engaging with fans in the virtual world? Maybe Alex, I can come to you on that one.
Well, interestingly, bragging rights, which is the fact that I want to show off that I'm part of a community, is a key component of being part of a community. And one of the reasons we're doing what we're doing is to find, and we haven't found it yet, but it's to find ways for people to brag in a positive way, to show that they belong to a brand, to a community, that they have an influence. That's why we do voting in our case. And NFTs, memorabilia, and all this stuff matters in that way because you can show them. Digital memorabilia is another way to do it. And I'm going to say something slightly controversial because I don't have the answer to that, but I think in the US, there is a massive culture of sports memorabilia and trading and cards, everything. In Europe, we don't have that culture. Historically, we have that as a kid with Panini cards, but we don't have that as an adult. And what's going to be interesting is how technology is going to bring, or not, but going to bring and educate the young adult, let's say, into that space, because we don't culturally have that in our genes. But yes, at the end, it's recognition. The same way when you play video games, you play, a CS:GO, and you buy $20 to get the customized, sorry to say it, weapon, or you play Fortnite, and it's the same. You spend $100 to customize your experience. Well, it's all about recognition, and that's where sports and fan engagement, fan monetization should go through. It's about the recognition. If I'm in Korea, in Japan, in Turkey, in Brazil, I would like to AC Milan to tell me that I exist in their eyes. How can you make this happen? And that's what we are trying to work for.
Neeraj, maybe I can sort of ask you the same question, but in a kind of different way. Like, how are we actually seeing that impulse to collect kind of show up? Like, what are the sorts of things that fans are buying in an online world?
It's still really early, so but there's some really interesting data points as well. So if you look at Alex touched on this trading cards and stuff like that. it's still super early, but for example, just this month, and this seems to happen every 2, 3, 4 months at the moment, the record for a sports trading card, digital one, was broken. Someone paid 600,000 euros for a Erling Haaland card. So we're seeing at one extreme, we're seeing that kind of thing happening, like probably fairly serious collectors who are looking at some of this stuff, and that's definitely a market signal. And I think we see that with some of what we might look back on and look at as the blue chip NFT collections, that kind of thing. But then at the other end of the scale, it's all very, very fragmented. And what I mean by that is, I don't think we haven't figured out how we're going to show off online that we're part of this club, other than I might change my social media background or my profile picture. But already you've got Twitter, who are going to start authenticating this stuff with their hexagonal frame. So now they're rolling this out so that if you have a hexagonal frame, that means you own that NFT. And it's going to be so interesting to see how this plays out. But the analogy I always use, there's two analogies. When someone says that they think this is going to be a bit of a fad or something like that, the same things were said about the internet. My partner Mac, who's my fellow co-founder, when he started his first sports internet business in the mid-90s, he sat in boardrooms and they said nobody's going to put their credit card in the internet, nobody's going to trust that. And now, one click Amazon, we don't even think about it. So you've got that analogy where people are saying, why is this stuff going to be worth anything, because they don't really understand it. And then the other analogy I'll give is handbags. It's like the functionality of one handbag is the same as another handbag. So then why does this handbag trade at $2,000 and that one at 10,000 and that one at 20,000 and that one at 200 and that one at 20? And it's the same thing around scarcity, perception, image, et cetera, et cetera. So I think, it's going to be so interesting over the next year or two to see how these things settle. But the one thing that I have no doubt about whatsoever, especially as we increase our lives in these digital worlds, is the opportunities to show our fandom and affiliations and which clubs we belong to are going to be more abundant, not less. And if we believe that, then the collective value of these things will be more, not less.
We've talked a lot about fans and how fans are kind of being impacted and engaging with this as an innovation. I think we below about the actual teams and players themselves. Casper, you touched on this way of making sure that you can engage in different ways with your fan groups, and that not everybody not everything will suit everyone. But aside from that, like as a team and even as players, how are you finding this on the other side?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, to everything that's been said, we have to bear in mind that we've been impacted by COVID over this is the third season. So I think a point we haven't touched upon is they need to be close to the team. So for instance, all last season, we could not have a single fan in the stadium. This season, we are averaging around 50% of our capacity. We are allowed to have in, hopefully the last few matches of the end of the season, we can go to 100%. So we've really been impacted. So there is obviously the desire for the fan to be close to the players in the stadium, but also the players have mentioned on many occasions that is very strange to play in an empty stadium, and they are missing that support the fans are given, they're bringing to it. So I think they're also benefiting from this, seeing the support and feeling the support. In terms of us, we use it also to build our brand. We want to be a bigger club. We're bringing the club back. We have sort of been in turnaround mode from a brand perspective. So we need to be there and we need to offer our fans. And it's no secret that the performance on the pitch over the last decade hasn't been up to the standard where they used to be. So this is another way of showing the support to the team, which is just over and above buying the shirt. And you mentioned the collectibles in terms of the Panini cards and so forth. So I think the players, they're well aware that this is important and they're also supporting it.
And Neeraj and Alex, you're both trying to attack this problem in a different way. You're both looking at how sports teams can engage with fans a bit more. I'd love to hear from you both how, what you are trying to then bring to the teams. Obviously revenue is a part of it, but Neeraj, can you share a little bit more about like that real relationship that you're trying to build?
I mean, fundamentally, I think broadly, I see it as two issues that we're really attacking here. One is revenue. There's no commercial organization on the world that isn't interested in new revenue streams to make it more competitive and so on. And that's before we talk about things like future proofing. But I think the wider thing is something I think both Casper and Alex have already touched on, which is it's more about, okay, we have these hundreds of millions of fans, or a smaller team might have tens of millions, or a really small team might have hundreds of thousands of fans around the world, but they've got no way to feel closer to the team that other than watch the games on TV, maybe once visit the stadium if they're not local, and buy the shirt or something like that. So I think really it's important not to look at this as some sort of speculative money grab, because that's the wrong attitude, and that's where things go really wrong in crypto. And it's more about, okay, how can we increase the revenue, but also fanning. I almost don't like the word fan engagement because it feels like a very corporate word. It's more about, how can we introduce new feelings, new closeness, new opportunities in a way that doesn't depend on where somebody is based, or their ability to pay the money to come to the stadium, that kind of thing. So yeah, I mean, I'd say that's how I see it. And then there was something else, but I can't remember. If it comes back to me, I'll tell you after Alex answers.
So it's a important question. I mean, first of all, when you look at revenue stream of sports team, at some point you could argue, and I will probably be wrong on this one, but there is some ceiling. At some point there is some stuff where you cannot just increase either the price of the tickets or seats in the stadium. In the case of Casper, he can, because he's going to change the stadium. But at some point, it's the same. You cannot increase everything. So what are the new revenue stream? Because your salaries are always going to go up. You're going to have more and more investment to do. So there is a need of increasing revenue. If you look at the next 5 to 10 years, the only, I don't know if it's significant actually, but the only growth in terms of revenue is going to be digital. But what can you sell digitally? Clubs will always do everything related to content. That's the role of a club, a type of OTT or behind the scene and stuff like this. What else can you scale from a club point of view that can be developed globally, especially for big brands like this? It's not true for everybody, but for big brands like AC Milan and others, it is a key. They are powerful brands globally. So what can you do? And is it the role of a club to invest when eventually you're gonna have companies like us and others that gonna invest to develop features and product and gonna share that tech and that innovation with other clubs? The reality is we are agnostic. We love AC Milan. We also love, I'm going to take one that makes more, PSG, and we love different teams. But what we would like at some point, like what they are doing in the field, is we want them to offer more to their own fans, meaning that as a platform, we're going to have to become more and more agnostic, and hoping that clubs in the next 3 to 5 years are going to be more and more creative in what they offer to their fans, because not only it brings value to their fans, they're going to maybe not poach, but generate new fans that they never really identified before. And that's going to create an incremental revenue on top of that. And that's where I think it's exciting, is how can you clubs, they used to fight for revenue, again, I mean, sponsoring revenue. They are fighting on the field against other teams, but maybe one day they're going to fight for B2C revenue, for more casual users that wants to engage one way or another with brand X or Y. And that's where I think the challenge is going to be in the next 5 years, is how this company or these clubs are going to be creative enough to capture this market share.
All of this is obviously, being enabled by blockchain as a sort of development, but we also know that in itself is still a new technology, and some of these things are experimental. We saw recently, TikTok have some challenges releasing new sets of NFTs. We know that Instagram's going to release NFTs. Facebook is becoming Meta. Like, Niraj, maybe I can come to you and ask, all of this change and all of this innovation, also presents some challenges. And we talked about just the user experience challenge that it presents. But But can you talk to me about like some of the other challenges that we face with this as a technology, and also just talk about that social media piece and how all those people are engaging with this as a technology?
I think the risks are there because the media is always there to remind us that the risks are there, but also those risks are real, right? That's the reason, because it's new. And going back to, we talked about the evolution of sport, but if you look at the evolution of technology, what's different now versus 20 years ago is that we are mobile and global, and information moves very, very fast, which means it creates this Cambrian explosion of innovation, which is what's happening now. Everybody can learn from everybody else, but unfortunately, in its infancy, it does present risks, because one of the problems with crypto and blockchain, full stop, is that if you're responsible for your account and your cryptocurrencies and whatever, then there's no recourse, there's no customer service, that kind of thing. The second thing is that the scams are becoming more sophisticated, and so on. So there is, it's not being flagged as risky for no reason. But then on the other side of that equation, you've got so many organizations springing up, like the people on this call, like Alex and like ourselves, who, we're happy to use our real names and happy to be accountable for our decisions, and building in a very transparent way, so that will help to de-risk these things. But I think the responsibility is shared between us and the clubs to make sure that we're not doing anything that could make a fan worse off, because I think that's the worst feeling, when you try and do something new and then for some reason something goes wrong and whoever's on the other side of it doesn't make it right or hasn't taken the appropriate risk. So I think, we're in this really tricky phase where if regulation is too heavy-handed, then it could really stifle the industry in certain countries and whatever. And I say that particularly because this toothpaste can't go back in the tube. If it doesn't thrive here, it'll thrive over there. It really will depend on which countries adopt it more openly. But on the other hand, I'm definitely one of the ones who's saying we do need some sort of light regulation, so that everybody else on the consumer side of this is protected, and it's not just left as a Wild West.
And talking just about regulation is not a threat; it's an opportunity. Actually, it's a way to ensure that all parties are accountable. And I think I hate to use that industry to compare it, but because I come from this industry 10 or even 15 years ago, the sports betting industry, or the regulated sports betting industry, online sports betting industry, 15 years ago, in Europe, but in US as well, was online gambling is bad, it's illegal, it's money laundering, and it's terrorism. Oh, suddenly someone figured out that you can tax it. Suddenly it's very good business, we have to do regulation. So here it's exactly the same. You're gonna have regulators and governments say, hey, we can tax this one way or another, and we're going to regulate it in order to generate a new revenue stream. It's not going to be the revenue stream for the sports team only, it's going to be for the government. But then they're going to regulate it, they're going to put agencies, they're going to put all of that stuff, and that's fine. As long as the regulation doesn't kill the innovation, and that's the danger, it's fine. But yeah, again, when I was looking again today, there is few pieces that if you go back in 1996, 1997, on media pieces talking about how internet is a fad and that's never going to work. Well, yes, sure, whatever.
Not just a fad, but also that's where all the scams were, black market, yes, whatever. It's the same thing again. And all of these things that exist in traditional markets as well.
Casper, from your perspective as a club engaging with fans, you obviously have a huge duty to protect those fans and maintain that relationship and nurture that relationship. One of the things that blockchain does bring is this element of transparency that is new. Can you talk to me a little about how you guys have thought about that? Like fans who might be new to Web3, who are experiencing that offering for the first time through engaging with you and what your team is doing. Like, how are you thinking about making sure those fans are protected too?
we obviously play by the rules in terms of what the government allows us. That's the first and foremost, and that's the reason we don't officially have any betting partners, because that's not legal at the moment in Italy, and or endorsing betting. So first and foremost, follow the rules and what's set up by the local government. But I also think as soon as we put our brand to any product or any other business, we are endorsing it. And our fans would think, okay, this is promoted by AC Milan or whatever club it is. So there is sort of a sign of approval, and that's the reason. It might not be, if there's anything happening, it might not be socios.com who get the blame, but it might be the club who get the blame for whatever could happen in that sense. And that's the reason 10 years ago, with in certain markets, alcohol or beer not being allowed, the beer beverage companies, they sort of promoted responsible drinking. And I think then later on, we've sort of promoted responsible gambling. And I think there has to be an element of that. And I think key is to educate here. Ultimately, it is a consumer's own decision. But no one wants to hear that. If they have lost their monthly salary or thousands and thousands of euros for whatever reason, they couldn't control themselves, then it's the clubs to blame because we are the one endorsing it. But I think education is key. So stick within the law and then educate, communicate. And to Alex's point, we don't see a regulation as a policing. We see it as an opportunity. And as long as we embrace that and work within those rules and we communicate, then I think that's absolutely key.
And to top up on this, in our case, for example, the reason we use blockchain as the foundation of what we call the fan tokens, it's because we give a voice to the fans. So the fans can vote on the music in the stadium, the design of the jersey, etc., etc. But because we tell the fan, hey, you're going to have a voice, you're going to have an influence, we wanted to make sure that there is no cheating, there is integrity, there is fairness. And that's the beauty of blockchain. When a fan today decide, AC Milan or another team, something, the whole process of the voting is actually on the chain. It's public. You cannot change it. It's not like your TV show, Saturday music TV show, where you send an SMS and you still believe that you voted for the winner on this. That's really, really different. And the second thing as well, and that's more related to socios, is these brands, AC Milan and others, are massive consumer-facing brands who have 100 years of history, and you need to be careful and you need to protect them. The reason I'm saying that is because when we created Socios and our blockchain called Chili's 4 years ago, we created something that is called proof of authority. The point here is we didn't created the fan tokens of AC Milan, PSG, etc. on mainnet like Ethereum, BSC, Solana. Why? Because the biggest risk for these brands is to be eventually having a developer somewhere creating either illegal gambling product, a DeFi, whatever product, and eventually scamming someone with the name of AC Milan or others because they're using a fully open blockchain. So when we started 4 years ago, our priority was how do we ensure, how do we give confidence and make these brands comfortable that they are not dragged in something where there is danger. The technology is going to allow us to change that and to become more and more open, but that's something to keep in mind, that the reason we also have 130 teams or 130 brands with us is because our priority is actually to focus on protecting them from, not from the technology, but from the abuse of the technology that can be done by third parties.
Yeah. It's a super interesting world, and I think like it's changing so rapidly. I want to ask you all actually, what role you maybe see this in actually bringing fans into Web3 and how they might start to use this as their first experience maybe of Web3. We've seen it a little bit, I think, in the like art NFT space, where I know from my personal experience, friends of mine, their first interaction with crypto and blockchain has been through buying an NFT that they're really excited about. It feels to me, at least, that for some of the fans, this might be the first step that that they take into exploring blockchain, crypto, Web3. Have you noticed that? Do you share that hypothesis? Casper, maybe I can ask you first.
No, certainly, and I agree with you. I do think supporting your football team with a small investment, and the first time you go into this space, it seems quite innocent because you're actually supporting a team. You're buying something you are excited about. We launched one of the first NFTs, or going to launch one of the first, or the second NFT. The first one was with Alex, but the second one we're going to launch is in terms of charity. We have purchased a shirt from South Sudan for UNICEF to support the redevelopment of that area. We paid a significant amount of money of a shirt which was found by a used 6-year-old child. We bought the shirt through a photographer, and now are showing the shirt in our museum. And all proceeds go to UNICEF and to South Sudan. We are now discussing the opportunity, and we're going to launch a thing within a month, an NFT where you can buy, and everything goes to UNICEF. So I think these are good initiatives which sort of get people starting and get trusting that it's okay, and at least it's not someone benefiting out in the unknown, but this is actually for a good cause. And I think that's sort of a very, first of all, for a good cause, for charity, and secondly, it's quite innocent way of getting into it. And we all started somewhere, and I think that could be the way forward.
That's awesome. Really exciting to hear that this that you're doing things that are also having much wider impact. Alex, I know you were about to say something on the tip of your tongue to the question. Maybe I'll come to you next.
Yeah, I mean, today there are 200 million people, more or less, all over the world that are educated-ish, let's say, about blockchain, Web3, etc. Does sports going into that space gonna increase the number? Yes, but it's gonna increase that number just because statistically, anyway, there will be hundreds more million of people all over the world that's gonna embrace that technology in the next 3 to 5 years, and statistically, 40-60% of them are sports fans. The question is, how can you mix these two kind of passion between the technology or the utility of the technology and the brands that you're supporting? I've seen, because of course that's what we do with Socios, when someone who's gonna make a deposit of €2 or €5 or €20 into the platform, sometimes they contact us, say, hey, that's my first interaction with something that is blockchain related. It's not good or bad, it's just education. That's just curiosity. And it's interesting because these users will discover other opportunities. It's not about investing in Bitcoin, it's about understanding the technology and how this can change or at least enhance the relationship with brands in the next decade.
Yeah, completely. And I'd say it's all about this move from speculation and the fringes to usefulness. The more useful these things become for the everyday person, the more that onboarding is going to happen, whether it's through fan tokens or anything else. So that's that. And so we've got that piece around the usefulness. And sorry, my phone's going off and it's driving me mad. I thought I'd turned it off. Apologies. So yeah, and then I was going to say, as part of that, I think the onboarding comes when the crypto and blockchain elements start becoming more trustworthy, which we've already talked about, and more obfuscated. So in the same way, we talk about the relationship between the internet cycle in the late 90s. Like, nobody cares which protocol they're using, or whether it's HTTP or HTTPS or anything like that. They just use the products because it's useful, because it's trustworthy, and because there's an element of regulation around it. And I see all of this going the same way. We've got to remember we're still very, very early on this, but we're starting to see the start of these things becoming mainstream. And I think, a small plug for you guys as well, when you start obfuscating that the way that checkout will, by allowing fiat payments, but the back end is crypto, that's when it starts getting really interesting, because that's when the average person can look at that and say, that's familiar, I'm going to use that, instead of having to do all this weird stuff to get OpenSea, MetaMask, NFT, that kind of thing.
So much exciting stuff. I feel like we could talk about this for a long time, but we're coming to the end. At Checkout, we've got a bit of a tradition with all things that we do, both internally and also some of our external events, to do a round of quick fire questions. So I'm going to go through a few of these. And maybe if we go in the order, Alex, Niraj, Casper, just to keep it quick for the last couple of minutes. So with no strings attached, because we know that this is a massive game. Like, what's the price of Bitcoin going to be at the end of the year? Still 9 months away.
I think it's going to be either higher, lower, or more or less the same.
I have no idea. I buy it every week because I have no idea. I still do that, but I'm an optimist. So if it's more than $100,000, I'll be happy.
There we go.
I think everyone wants it to increase, absolutely. So I'll agree with that, the highest level at the end of the year.
A payments one here. When was the last time that you used cash to make a payment?
Well, in a taxi in Abu Dhabi, because for whatever reason, they don't accept credit card. But interestingly, I have a 3.5 years old kid, and my kid will never touch cash in his life. Everything related to money will be digital for him.
Yeah, I agree. For me, it was 2 weeks ago. I gave a bartender a cash tip because I wanted to make sure it went to him. A huge amount of the world still relies on cash, but I think in the next 20 years, that will be gone.
Yeah, living in Italy is all about coffee. so spending money on coffee is usually in cash.
That morning espresso. If you own an NFT, what's the most interesting one that you own?
I own only NFTs from related to Socios, which are given for free. So they don't have yet a lot of utility. I'm considering to buy on a personal level Bored Apes NFTs, because I want to understand the community that is behind it. So if you can help me find the right one, cheap, please, or cheaper, that would be great.
I'm sure we can find you a Bored Ape dealer somewhere. Niraj.
I'm the opposite. I have so many NFTs in so many projects because it was the fastest way to learn. But the one, we talk about the bragging rights. The one that I like the best is the first one I ever bought, and it is it's just digital art, nothing else. Beautiful piece made by a guy called Silvio Vieira, who is one of the original Ethereum artists who was producing stuff from 2017 onwards. And I don't know if it's going to be worth a lot later or not. I don't really care. I just thought this technology is all about putting your toe in and doing something. So I needed to put my toe in and do something. I saw an opportunity. I'm a pretty experienced investor. I think it's going to be worth a lot. If it's not, I don't care. I'm going to hang it in my house.
Awesome. And Casper?
No, that has to be within our own world, together with Alex, the NFT we launched in autumn. That was my first experience into that.
Awesome. One last one. What's the most innovative, exciting, weird thing that you're seeing out there, or what are you most excited about right now?
Well, that's a very broad question. What I'm the most excited about, in our case, I'm going to be a bit company centered, is going to be the TV campaign we will launch later earlier to the summer, and how we're going to start to try at least to explain to the mainstream what we are doing and how we can grow this ecosystem with the fans.
Cool. Well, I think from a personal excitement point of view, obviously everything we're building at DSO, we're doing something completely new, hasn't been done before. So there's a challenge that comes with that, but it's exciting as well. In terms of innovation, so you guys will probably know this, but many of the audience might not. But a group of complete strangers got together to try and buy a physical copy of the US Constitution a few months ago. And I'm not a US citizen, but I even put money into that because I thought this is so interesting. I'd love to be a part of that. I'd love to own a piece of that. And more importantly, I want to see where it goes. The bid was unsuccessful. They lost to the guy who owned Citadel, but they raised more than $40 million. And I think that's amazing for a bunch of anonymous strangers. Never seen anything like it again. We will see lots like it going forward.
I think so too. And finally, Casper.
No, I just think the amount of innovation going into this space is astonishing. We are presented by opportunities on a weekly basis. I wish we had the capabilities to do all of them because there are some really wicked ideas. But I do think for us, have we spoken 18 months ago, we wouldn't be talking about NFT as we've been doing today. I think this space is developing so rapidly that it's only going to be more interesting, and that excites us. We as a football club, this is sort of an old traditional sports organization, really need to get our act together and follow this trend, because otherwise we're being left behind by much more innovative industries, and that's the challenge. That's what excites me, that we really have to be on the beat here.
Well, I'm super excited to continue following what you're all doing. Also want to just thank everybody who's listening today, and particular thanks to our panel for what I found a super fascinating discussion. I even managed to run over, so I apologize for that. I hope that everybody listening will join us for our next virtual event. We've got a couple more crypto ones coming up over the next few months. And so you can learn more about that. You can learn more about how we at checkout.com are partnering with crypto companies around the world at checkout.com/crypto. Lots of our team members will be at various crypto events over the next little while. So if you're there, come and say hi. And thank you again. Have a lovely afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.